Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Williams, and you are listening or perhaps watching to another episode of Retail Redeveloped. Today, you guys know that I like to get a little nerdy when it comes to commercial real estate, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to get into analytics. We're going to get into the numbers. We're going to get into the details. So if you don't want to hear that, go ahead and listen to Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan or somebody more interesting than me. But right now, I am on the line with Chuck McShane, Costar's Director of Market Analytics for the Carolinas. He is, like I said, Director of Market Analytics. He covers data, trends on industrial, office, multifamily, retail sectors. Chuck, thank you for being here today. Before we dive into the analytics and the numbers, do me a favor. Tell everybody kind of who you are, how you came to sit in the seat that you're in, a little bit about your background, and more importantly, why the hell should people listen to what you have to say?
Well, thanks. It's great. It's great to be here. And I've been in the Charlotte market for about 15 years now. Always focused on urban development and economic development. For the last 6 years, I was working with the Charlotte Chamber, which became the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, on helping companies move into the region. So making sure those companies had the data that they needed to make the right decisions. One big part of that was commercial real estate. So focus on economic trends. In March, I had the opportunity to move over to Costar to develop a market analytics program for the Carolinas, particularly for the Charlotte region, as they work to get more in-market expertise for our Costar investors.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, one thing that you have to give Costar is they take their analytics and things like that very, very seriously. So let's jump right into it. Talk to me about, you're looking at the trends, you're looking at the data. Everybody wants to know what is the state of the economy right now? What should people be ready for? What should people be looking out for? Let's just start broad macro terms.
I think we're at a real turning point in the economy at this point in economic growth. We've had 14 months now of slow activity. Things are starting to really ramp up. What's different about this recession than previous ones is that, this was really a pause more than a recession. The structural parts of the economy are still going strong. We're seeing that in Charlotte in particular because the finance industry has continued to add jobs throughout this pandemic. People have, at the higher end, are coming out of this with more savings and pent-up demand. We're starting to see hiring pick up as well. So, consumer spending is up. Certain categories it's not. We can get into that in a little more detail. But I think we're at a turning point. We're about to things are about to pick up this summer. It's going to be it's going to be an exciting summer.
So I've had this theory, or it's not my theory. I didn't make it up, but yeah, I'm lucky to be able to talk to people that are pretty smart about retail and real estate every week. And one of the terms that I've really liked, I've said it on this show before, is the idea of revenge spending. A lot of people have been pent up in their house for a year straight. They can only cook so many casseroles. They can only grill so much outside. They haven't bought a new outfit that wasn't made by Lululemon or some athleisure brand in a year. And just anecdotally, non-scientifically, it feels like there should be a pent-up demand and these people should want to get out and open the floodgates of spending a little bit. Is that just, hyperbole or is there any data that would support that?
I think you've seen it already in terms of where people are spending their money. Certain categories, people have been spending a lot more time at home. You've been looking at that faded couch that you've been sitting on for the last year. Maybe it's time to reinvest in that. Home improvement stores are off the charts with growth. E-commerce clearly has been growing as well. So and then cars, the durable goods. That's another category of retail. I guess you don't necessarily typically think of that as retail, but that's another category that's growing tremendously. Clothing stores have and electronic stores have been probably the hardest hit. But as people start to come back to the office, I think you will see more, particularly on the higher end, more spending in that.
I was just in Austin, Texas yesterday and was really lucky to tour the Music Lane development along with, the Domain and some other really, really interesting retail users. And it's amazing to me because obviously if you're running Brooks Brothers or another true legacy brand, that it's probably scary times. But it's amazing, this new influx of retailers, even in clothing and apparel. To your point, some of the places that have been really hard hit, it gets me jazzed up. I mean, I'm walking these streets and I'm seeing brands that haven't even made it to Charlotte yet, but I keep hearing there's this buzz. Just to name a couple: Everlane, Aviator Nation, Outdoor Voices, Howler Brothers, and I'm forgetting a half a dozen more that I stuck my head in and really enjoyed seeing them. I'm so excited. I'm torn. I feel horrible for all the people who have been affected by this. My heart goes out to every legacy retailer that was doing the right thing, reinvesting their brand, staying current, and has just got crippled by this. But at the same time, there's going to be some tremendous opportunities for this next wave of, whether it be digitally native brands, the direct-to-consumer guys, or just people that are right now only selling in the back of their garage. I mean, I feel like there's going to be some opportunity for that new growth to come out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those brands that are really specialized, that have a niche, are going to be the ones that come out of this the strongest. There's a lot of opportunity. I think that's a trend that we saw happening before the recession, before the pandemic. I think it's accelerated now. These may not be high volume retailers, but they have a niche, they have a specialty, and they have a lot of credibility in that niche as well. And I think that's really the future of smaller scale retail.
So talk to me about something you just said sparked another massive topic when it comes to this, the accelerator, right? What everybody says that, this pandemic was I'd let you speak to the data of it, but a 3 to 5 year acceleration of what was already an extremely quickly changing business. What is there data to support that, or is that just more kind of jargon that us retail guys like to throw around?
Well, I think the most obvious piece of data that's out there on that is the acceleration of e-commerce. Right. It was growing about 1% a year market share since about 2005. Then it jumped to almost 20% of market share in April. It's come back down now, but it's settled at a higher trajectory. So it's gone from about 11% market share of all retail in March 2020 to about 14 to 15% now. So it's now on a trajectory to continue growing at a higher pace. Amazon's a big part of that, but also you've seen Amazon's market share of e-commerce decline over this year because other companies have revamped their e-commerce abilities.
Is that just the majors? Are we just talking about how? Because obviously, Walmart was a sleeping giant that woke up real fast. Target obviously made massive headway in their online. So is it just those other behemoths that are kind of pushing back and not going out without a fight when it comes to Amazon, or is that more of an aggregation of the entire market chipping away?
I think it's more of an aggregation of the entire market. I think we're seeing more. I was talking to someone from one of the larger retailers now who was mentioning that in the past you would package things to end up in a store, and today they're not spending that much time doing that because those are going direct to consumers now. They're not ending up in the store. So packaging is now not as they're not over packaging things now because that they are going direct to consumer.
That's so interesting. So how do you let's look into the future? It's gone from 11 to 15%. How far into the future are you looking? I mean, do you see it? Do you see a future where it hits 51%, or do you think that there's kind of a natural equilibrium that's going to happen?
I think there wouldn't be a natural equilibrium somewhere. I think that there's some goods that people are going to want to continue buying in person. I think you've seen that with the data on investment. Grocery anchored tenants, grocery anchored centers have done very well with investors, particularly in high growth areas. People still want to I know grocery delivery has been a big thing through the pandemic. My wife and I have been big supporters of that. But at some point, I think people do want to get their groceries, essential goods at in-person markets. I think also experiential retail is going to be a big part going forward. Those brands you mentioned in Austin and those adaptive reuse and those mixed use facilities, mixed use environments where there's a cultural component to it as well. I think that's always going to have some amount of market share for those types of products.
So grocery is fascinating to me. I am so, and when I was in Dallas the other day, I had a really, really interesting discussion with a very intelligent, retail focused, kind of large institutional buyer. And his point was he's very bullish on grocery anchored centers because he considers it like last mile distribution. Right. And I understand that. And I don't necessarily disagree with the premise. But in my mind, I can also see a future where I'm going up to the grocery store and it looks very different. I could see a future where it looks like a massive bank teller where there's 3 or 4 drive up windows and I'm texting on the way and somebody's stacking it into my car and I'm moving down the road. Now, I hate grocery delivery. My wife loves grocery delivery. I've never ordered anything and gotten exactly what I ordered ever once. Yeah. It's never happened. And the avocados are shite. I don't love it, but I can also see a grocery store having a 20,000 square foot last mile distribution point and a 200,000 square foot, large industrial facility that is out in Westinghouse Boulevard or pick your industrial hub that's outside. So I don't know. I'm really torn on the grocery thing, and I think it could be one of the more fascinating kind of case studies over the next decade.
Absolutely. I mean, you need that. You need fresh goods, so you need that last mile facility, regardless of whether it's e-commerce or not. And I mean, you've seen it already, the experiential differences in places like Harris Teeter or Publix. It's a different experience ordering your goods and maybe getting a few bruised apples when there's a pandemic going on. When there's not, maybe you don't have to put up with that as much anymore.
Right. So let's go. You mentioned something else about experiential. Obviously that's a huge buzzword in my industry. Tell me what experiential retail means to you. Tell me what you think. I hate using buzzwords, but I end up doing it a lot. The store of the future looks like. I mean, what does experiential retail mean to you, and how can retailers adapt and meet this need? Like, what should people be thinking about as it relates to experiential retail?
I think about. Was at Camp North End's Wednesday farmers market this week, which is kicking off here in Charlotte.
How cool, man! Camp North End guys, go check it out. It's really they're really doing some great things.
Oh yeah, and that's one example of those industrial redevelopment where there's the cultural component, where there's a live work component as well. I think that destination shopping to some extent is for standard goods is not going to happen anymore. You're not going to go to a mall anymore. You have to be, there has to be another reason for you to be there, whether you're living there, whether you're working there, or whether there's some other event happening. So I think whether it's just a cool architecturally, like these old industrial buildings, which is a trend happening throughout the Southeast, the redevelopment of mills, or whether it's just a place where people are gathering. I think for adaptive reuse for these industrial sites, there's a lot of advantages there because there's some outdoor component as well. As we're getting more used to getting back in person, I think having an outdoor component, having high ceilings, having good natural light, all of that is going to be a big part of it.
So walk me through something in the analytics, in the data that has surprised you over the last year or even the last month as people seem to be seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I'd love it to be about retail, but it can be about anything. Walk me through something that you're like, okay, wow, didn't see that coming.
Well, I think in terms of the in terms of retail, I think the narrative has been that there's just been an apocalypse, and it's been the retail apocalypse, and that's not really borne out by the stats. I mean, things aren't rosy. Rent growth is still off. Construction is down, but it's not down as much as you would think. In areas that with higher population growth, they're still seeing strong rent growth. Construction is down, lower than it was since 2011, which is a historical trough of construction activity. But we are seeing strong investment in neighborhood centers, strong investment in mixed-use centers. So while we think rent growth is going to continue to decline throughout 2021 in terms of retail, it's not as dire as people think. There's really a two-pronged recovery for retail.
And why do you think neighborhood centers and mixed-use centers are weathering that storm better?
I think, again, it's the convenience factor, being close to where people live, and then it's the experiential factor for the mixed-use facilities as well going forward. I think there's a lot of optimism going forward that that's going to be the future of high-end retail. So
another thing that I've experienced and I've heard as it relates, I mean, you let the retail apocalypse genie out of the bottle. So I can't. I'm like a dog with a bone, man. You can't say that and not have me comment. It seems like a huge percentage of the retailers that are going out of business. Again, getting back to that accelerator. I mean, not a lot of these retailers that have gone out of business and declared bankruptcy, and I'm like, oh, no, are you serious? I mean, if anything, a lot of these announcements, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I thought that happened 6 months ago. I guess I just assumed that they were going out of business. Not to say all of them are bad, but you just see a lot of cracks in the armor. I had a really interesting, we were in the neighborhood goods store, which if you're listening to this and haven't checked out neighborhood goods, it's really interesting. It's kind of retail as a service, highly curated, small format department store. I guess that might be a horrible description, but that's kind of how it feels to me. And it kicked off a discussion of, are there any of these big box department stores that are going to make it? My money personally was on Nordstrom. But everybody in the room had a different opinion. Do you think big boxes like that can survive? If so, where are you putting your money, and what do you see coming on and kind of taking their place? I know that was a multi-pronged question.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the Class A malls are probably going to be in good shape, and I think that the places like Nordstrom, like Neiman Marcus, they're probably going to be okay if they can focus on those higher end malls. I think at the other end, what was interesting, we saw in the data in the first quarter, Target is actually buying up a lot of older Kmart facilities. So the other end of the spectrum, I think where folks haven't gotten as used to online shopping, I think that you're going to see Target take a greater market share there as well.
Yeah, you got to hand, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but you got to hand it to Target and Walmart and those guys that have just on a dime become e-commerce players. I got to tell you, the Walmart app, people make fun of me because I like Walmart. Like, I'm sorry, guys. I know I wear shirts with snaps on them and funky shoes, but I freaking like Walmart. And the reason is, honestly, I think their app is almost as good as Amazon's now. And the prices are unbelievable. They deliver almost as quick as Amazon, sometimes even quicker. It's incredible what they've been able to do. And you got to take your hat off. Another example that I'm seeing is just how innovative a lot of the restaurants. I'm a restaurant guy at heart. I love restaurants. Cut my teeth doing restaurants. That's a huge passion of mine. And the guys that have pivoted overnight, just as an example, Chipotle. I mean, it is a completely different buying experience today than it was a year ago at Chipotle. And it's been like this for 6 months. So literally within like 3, 4, 5 months, they pivoted across the country. I don't know off the top of my head how many units they have, but I know they have a freaking bunch. And so you've got to give it to these retailers that have seen this, business ending crisis and said, nah, we're not going out. Like we're going to figure this out. Any retailers that is kind of surfacing in the data that have caught your eye and you said, wow, these guys are rolling with the punches?
Yeah. I mean, I think Target is probably the best example. I haven't taken too close a look at the restaurants that are out there, but I think Target is doubling down across all kind of categories of spending. So they're making investments in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and in these old Kmart buildings as well. So I think Target was strong going into the recession, but I think that they've made some interesting moves.
I mean, personally, I think Costar, Chuck, should probably pay for you and I to go check out the Jackson Hole Target. I think it's great research. I think the Costar subscribers would support that. So just let me know who we need to talk to make that happen. What are the other things that have really kind of emerged? Obviously, convenience, location. What are some other things that have bubbled to the surface that have become just a part of the consumer psyche that you think aren't just kind of a blip in the radar and that are going to continue to form the future?
Yeah, I think I think what's interesting from an urban development perspective is what's going to happen with a lot of these big boxes, these Class C, Class B malls. Again, those types of days where you would go and spend a whole Saturday just getting kind of basic goods, basic clothes, that's gone. But there's a lot of real estate there that's still that cities need to figure out what to do with. And I think that's going to be it's definitely not as sexy as a Camp North End or some other
could be
redevelopment, but it could be, right? And I think that's going to be the new wave of adaptive reuse is what's happening with malls. And we're seeing
now.
You
think it's going to be like a densification or just like a complete rethink of, a ground up rethink? Like to me, it's very straightforward to do what like they've done at Phipps Plaza, right? You add a hotel, you add multi, and you structure parking and you figure that out. But I'm sure there's some really smart people out there trying to figure out how to do that right now.
There's some pretty interesting projects out there across the spectrum. I mean, you're looking at in Greenville, they have the Bells Tower Mall where they're creating a office headquarters for the county government, and then they're creating space potentially for private developers to come in. You've got the Haynes Mall in Winston-Salem, where True Lion has built an operations center. In Philadelphia, they've had healthcare operators move in. And what I think is going to be the most interesting is that, and I'm not a construction guy, so I don't know the feasibility of this construction-wise. Sometimes people can think up these great ideas
architects, man.
I
have those meetings every week.
But housing, we're in a housing crunch. Anyone who's tried to buy a house in Charlotte knows they're going off the market in 12 hours. But how do we redevelop these big plots of land, these big parcels of land for potential housing development? I think that's going to be a big topic of discussion going forward as well.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, because for every, South Park Mall or, picking a Phipps, like we said, there's half a dozen B and C malls that, the writing's on the wall. Like there's, I don't want to name names, but I was in a mall the other day, and I mean, you could set a mortar off in the middle of it and there wouldn't be any casualties. I mean, it's those guys have to be running scared. And, I've seen it. There was a mall in Chapel Hill where they are literally trying to turn it inside out, right? You wonder, obviously it's a massive undertaking, tremendous lift as it relates to money invested, but you got to think we're going to see some insanely creative adaptive reuse programs with some of these malls that have good underlying demographics and traffic flow and positioning. I can't wait to see it. I think it'll be really interesting. Any other trends, construction wise, or anything else that you've seen that kind of has your attention?
Well, one thing we've seen in the office market is particularly in high density central cities where rents have come down a little bit, is it's allowed kind of mid-market tenants to take out leases that maybe they wouldn't have been able to afford in the past, and some creative tenants as well. So, I think that there's going to be opportunity there for retail, for some up and coming retailers to get a few good deals here and there, and some particularly in denser cities where rents have come down slightly. So it'll be interesting. I think it's, there's a lot of chaos now. I think that there's an opportunity from that can come out of that for some of these up and comers.
Yeah, I think so too. And a question while I have you on the phone, I would love to understand from your perspective. Yeah, I feel like a fool that I didn't just completely pivot and become an industrial broker,
right.
36 months ago. What do you see for the future of industrial? Obviously, e-commerce is just absolutely fueling this kind of land grab for industrial. How do you see that playing out over the next, few years?
Yeah, I think you can't go wrong in the short term. You've had ports. Charleston Port had record imports and exports, record activity last year. I think here in Charlotte, you've seen some interesting work with the company Arrival, who's taking more warehouse space and creating manufacturing facilities with warehouse space, which I think that flex, that cell model of manufacturing will be really interesting for industrial brokers going forward.
Would you explain that a little bit more? I'd love to understand a little bit more about what a company like that does and why it's important.
So instead of an assembly line, they've got essentially. There was an article in the New York Times today about Arrival, and they've relocated their headquarters and 2 facilities here. But instead of a sort of heavy investment, heavy capital investment, heavy construction of a traditional non-movable kind of conveyor belt type of or assembly line type of facility, they've got cells within movable cells where they're making products, making cars, making vans in one place throughout the facility, which makes it a lot easier to move into existing real estate, existing industrial real estate. So there's a flexibility angle that's coming there, and there are other companies that are doing similar things as well.
Very cool, Chuck. You've already been extremely generous with your time. Before I let you go, before we start to wrap things up, tell people how they can learn more about the work you're doing. Your research has appeared in the New York Times, the Business Journal, BizNow, NPR. You talk to me, tell people how they can connect with you, how they can learn a little bit more about your working on. I don't know if you're on social or LinkedIn. Tell people how they can hear a little bit more about you.
So if you're a Costar subscriber in the Carolinas, I'm under the markets and sub-markets tab, and I'm also on LinkedIn, Chuck McShane, on Twitter at Chuck McShane as well. Do an occasional newsletter as well on Substack called Growth and Dreams about economic development topics in the Southeast.
Awesome. So I'm going to hit you with a couple quick knee-jerk kind of questions before I let you go. I was having a discussion with a friend the other day who's in the office world, and they have a theory that first floor space, it's not going to be just retail anymore, right? It's just going to be creative space. So think about, central business district, ground floor, instead of having a Panera Bread and a bar of some sort. It could be this WeWork feeling, brand ambassadorship kind of interesting space, right? There's going to be a blend of office and retail that's going to start blossoming. And, maybe for instance, the way the new banks aren't really banks, right? They've got donuts and coffee and, they're tap dancing while you kind of sign up for a checking account. That's a trend that my friend was saying that they think is just now starting and is going to really start to blur the lines between specifically office and retail. Have you seen anything that would support that argument?
I think you saw some creative a move away from the big first floor lobbies before the pandemic. I think you're going to continue to see that. I'd love to see more work from home space, more co-working space. I think some coffee shops have become de facto co-working spaces. I think that some smart smart developer, smart architect smart designer could come up with some really interesting ideas in that realm.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how the kind of suburban incubators are going to start to pop up. I mean, to me, it would make a ton of sense to maybe not do a 40,000 square foot WeWork or 50,000 square foot WeWork, but go out to some of these suburbs and pop in satellite spaces like that have a really cool vibe and have, a coffee provider, a lunch provider, a cool little happy hour spot, all kind of converging in a space that has really flexible membership options. I think that, and maybe this is just a blip and the work from home thing isn't going to be as big as it is right now, but something like that makes a lot of sense to me, especially as these suburbs are starting to densify a little bit. Like if you're in an apartment and you have a significant other that both works from home, that would not be good for my relationship. I don't think it would be good for a lot of people's relationships. So I wonder if that's going to be something that we continue to see too.
I mean, I think you've seen some of that in, kind of Charlotte centric episode, but if you think about Rock Hill in South Carolina there and some of the surrounding towns around the Charlotte area, you've seen that happen already. Especially ones that have a lot of that old industrial space that can be converted. So Knowledge Park, for example, and Rock Hill has some of these elements that you're discussing. There's a lot of great downtown kind of historic architecture that can be repurposed for this. That has that density, has that walkability, but not the same sort of traffic, not the same sort of parking cost that you would see in a center city. And if companies are going to go to that hub and spoke model, that could be where people are coming into the office maybe twice or three times a week. Having a co-working space there could be really beneficial.
Yeah, I think so as well. All right, Chuck, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for being on. I want to take a second and just acknowledge you for coming on, sharing your analytical brain with us. Always enjoy hearing somebody that's staring at the data more than I am. Tell me if I'm crazy or if I'm on the right track. So I'm sure our listeners enjoyed it as well. And just thank you for coming on and sharing with us.
Thanks, Adam.